Donald didn't fall because of a stroke. He fell because he had no reason to get up in the morning. At 76, Donald Whitmore had lived through more winters than he cared to count. A retired high school teacher from Michigan, he once stood tall in front of classrooms, raised 2 children into strong adults, and spent 45 years beside the woman he loved more than anything in this world. But after her funeral, the silence in his house became unbearable. Days passed like fog. Meals lost their taste. He'd wake up at 7 a.m. just like always, but now he didn't know why. He thought his children would call more often, maybe stop by every weekend like they used to. But they were busy. Jobs, kids, life. And Donald, who had spent his whole life giving, now found himself quietly fading, unsure of who would be there if he truly needed help. It wasn't pain that made his legs feel heavy. It wasn't illness that made him forget appointments. It was something harder to name, a kind of hollowing out. And one crisp autumn morning, as the light spilled across the empty kitchen table, Donald picked up a pen and wrote 7 words. What do I need to stand alone? That simple question became his turning point. In this video, we'll walk through the 7 essential foundations Donald discovered, pillars that helped him rebuild his life after 60, not just to survive, but to live with dignity, clarity, and quiet strength. These aren't just ideas. They are real practical truths that matter more than who visits, who doesn't, or who remembers to call. Because in the end, support isn't something you wait for. It's something you build step by step from within. Let's begin with the very first foundation, the one that often determines whether we rise with strength or shrink with fear when life begins to change. You can't be truly free if you're still waiting for your children to send money every month. Donald always believed that love and loyalty were enough to hold a family together. He worked hard, saved when he could, and paid for both of his children to finish college without a single loan. When they needed help with their first apartments or car repairs, he was there without hesitation. But now, at 76, sitting in a cold house with a broken heater, he found himself staring at a $480 repair bill he couldn't cover, and hesitating to ask his son for help. Not because he didn't trust him, but because he didn't want to feel like a burden. That moment, alone in the quiet, hit harder than any illness ever had. This kind of emotional trap, financial dependence masked as family love, is one of the most invisible dangers of aging. It sneaks in slowly, a missed bill here, a borrowed $100 there, until one day you realize your independence has quietly slipped through your fingers. The hardest part, it doesn't feel like a crisis until you desperately need something. And by then, it might be too late. According to AARP, 58% of Americans over 65 don't have enough savings to cover an unexpected medical bill over $1,000. That's not just about money. That's about control, peace of mind, and dignity. Donald learned this lesson the hard way, but he didn't stop there. He started tracking every dollar that came in and out. He switched to a simplified spending plan and used an app with large fonts and simple categories designed for seniors. He also talked to a financial advisor who helped him make better use of his Social Security income. Within 3 months, he had enough saved to cover 2 emergency repairs without calling anyone. The truth is, you don't need to be rich to feel secure. You just need to be prepared. Because financial freedom at this stage of life isn't about buying more. It's about depending less. It's about knowing that if something goes wrong, you'll be okay. Not because someone will step in, but because you've already stepped up for yourself. And for Donald, the moment he took control of his finances was also the moment he took back a piece of his confidence. But as he would soon realize, even money means little if your health begins to fade. So let's take a closer look at the second foundation, your physical strength, and what happens when it slowly slips away. Don't wait until you need someone to lift you up before you start learning how to stand on your own. A few weeks after his financial wake-up call, Donald began to notice something else. He wasn't sleeping well. His legs felt heavier when he got out of bed. Walking to the mailbox took longer than usual. And there were moments, brief but unsettling, when he forgot why he'd walked into a room. At first he chalked it up to aging. This is just what happens at 76, he told himself. But deep down, he knew it wasn't age. It was neglect. Not intentional, not dramatic, just quiet, passive letting go, too much sitting, too many frozen meals, a habit of reaching for pain pills instead of stretching. And slowly, his body began to whisper what it would soon start shouting. Take care of me, or I will stop carrying you. The difference between someone who maintains their health and someone who only reacts when it's failing is like the difference between holding the steering wheel and being a passenger in your own life. One has direction. The other just hopes not to crash. Donald realized he had been in the passenger seat for far too long. That's when he decided to make a small shift, not a full gym routine, just a morning walk around the block. At first it was 7 minutes, then 12, then 20. He replaced a few processed meals with simple foods rich in plant-based protein, lentils, tofu, a few scoops of cottage cheese. And he marked his calendar for his next checkup, making a promise to take it seriously this time. According to a Harvard study, seniors who walk at least 30 minutes a day reduce their risk of becoming bedridden by 41%. That's not just a statistic, that's a lifeline, and Donald grabbed it. The truth is, caring for your body isn't a luxury, it's a responsibility. Because when your legs are strong, your choices stay wide open. And when your body can move, your spirit can too. Donald still has aches. Some mornings are stiff. But now he doesn't feel powerless. He feels prepared. And just as the body needs movement to stay alive, the heart needs connection to stay open. In the next part of his journey, Donald would learn that growing older doesn't mean growing lonelier. If you know where to look for real companionship. Your family may love you, but you still need someone who loves your ordinary days. Donald had always been the quiet type. After his wife passed, he kept mostly to himself. He thought he was doing fine. After all, his kids called every Sunday. He had neighbors who waved. But the truth revealed itself in the silence between those phone calls, in the long afternoons where no one knocked, no one asked, no one needed anything from him. One rainy Wednesday, on a whim, he signed up for a book club at the local library. It felt strange at first, walking into a room full of strangers, holding a paperback he hadn't even finished. But when he sat down and saw Robert, an old friend from his teaching days, something inside him softened. They laughed. They remembered. They talked like no time had passed. And for the first time in months, Donald felt like he belonged again. There's a difference between being loved and being seen. Families can care deeply, but they can't always be present in the everyday. They have jobs, children, deadlines. Love is there, yes, but love from afar can't fill a chair at the dinner table or share a quiet walk on Tuesday mornings. Too many older adults shrink their social worlds out of shame or self-doubt. I'm too old for that. No one wants to hear my stories. I'll just be in the way. These thoughts sound small, but they carve deep loneliness. The danger is real. According to the CDC, chronic loneliness increases the risk of early death by 29%. That's not just emotion. That's biology. The body needs connection the same way it needs rest and food and sunlight. Donald's book club became more than a weekly meeting. It was his reminder that life could still surprise him. He began attending a small discussion group at the community center, exchanged phone numbers with a woman who also liked mystery novels, and made a habit of waving to the same 3 neighbors on his afternoon walks. Slowly he rebuilt a circle, not of fans or followers, but of real people who remembered his name, noticed when he didn't show up, and missed him when he did. You don't need an audience. You need allies. The kind who ask how you're really doing, who remember how you take your tea. And if your circle has grown too quiet, too small, too still, it's never too late to reach out and widen it again. And once Donald had people he could count on, he found himself waking up with more energy, more clarity. But something was still missing. He had company. He had comfort. What he needed next was purpose. When you still have a purpose, age is just a number. For weeks, Donald had been waking up early, making coffee and sitting by the window. The mornings were quiet, peaceful even, but also empty. One day, as he looked at a photo of his youngest granddaughter, he had a sudden thought. What will she know about me when I'm gone? That very morning, he opened a blank notebook and began to write. Just one page. A memory about his first bicycle, the smell of rust and oil, the thrill of freedom, the scrape on his knee that didn't even hurt. The next day, he wrote about meeting his wife. Then about the time he nearly failed his first year of teaching. And just like that, a new habit was born. Donald didn't call it a memoir. He called it Morning Letters to the Future. 1 page a day, no pressure, no edits. Just life, remembered. There's something powerful about having a reason to get out of bed that isn't just about obligation or routine. People who lose their sense of purpose often begin to fade, not just emotionally, but physically. Without something to aim toward, days blur together. Meals feel mechanical. Sleep becomes restless. And eventually, the world starts to feel smaller and smaller. But those who keep a goal alive, no matter how simple, tend to move through life with a sharper mind and a steadier heart. According to the National Institutes of Health, seniors who report having a clear life purpose show 22% better memory performance and are 34% less likely to experience depression. That's not wishful thinking. That's science. Your purpose doesn't have to impress anyone. It just has to move you. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's planting a garden in your backyard. Maybe it's learning how to play the piano or sketching birds at the park. These aren't hobbies. They're anchors, reminders that you're still becoming, still contributing, still here. Donald doesn't write every page for his grandchildren. Some are for himself, to remember, to reflect, to feel that gentle spark that says, "There's more I can give." And now that he had a reason to move forward each day, Donald felt more grounded. But even with clarity and direction, life can still bring unexpected pain. That's why the next foundation matters more than we often admit. The quiet strength we build inside when the world around us begins to shift. No one can live through your grief for you. The first month after his wife passed was, as Donald described it, a blur of long nights and cold mornings. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt like a museum, filled with memories but empty of life. He'd find himself making too much coffee, setting 2 plates instead of 1, and then sitting down in silence. Friends called. His kids visited when they could, but none of it filled the space she left behind. At first he tried to stay strong for his children, smiled, nodded, said I'm okay even when he was, but holding it all in made him feel like he was drowning in slow motion. And the more he leaned on his kids for comfort, the more he could see their helplessness. He realized that by placing his pain on their shoulders, he was only making them carry weight they weren't prepared to hold. Emotional resilience isn't about pretending you're fine. It's not about staying busy or distracting yourself until the sadness goes away. It's about giving your grief a safe place to land, without expecting others to fix it. Donald started writing letters to his wife, not to send, just to speak. He kept them in a small box beside the bed. Some were 1 sentence, some were pages long. He also joined a support group at the senior center, not to talk at first, just to listen. There, in a room of quiet strangers, he found a sense of shared humanity that slowly softened the ache. He began meditating for 5 minutes each morning, focusing on breath, not thoughts. Some days the pain still came in waves, but now he didn't fight it. He let it pass through like weather. Many people believe that showing sadness is weakness, that by not crying, not talking, they're protecting others. But what they're really doing is turning grief inward where it festers. The truth is, healing doesn't come from hiding pain. It comes from meeting it face to face and saying, "You're allowed to be here, but you don't get to stay forever." Donald still misses her. He always will, but he no longer feels broken. He feels whole, with a scar, yes, but with strength in the shape of that scar. And with that emotional foundation in place, he was ready to build something even more meaningful. Because while pain may arrive uninvited, change is something we must choose. And learning to adapt, especially after 70, might be the most powerful decision of all. When no one else is there, faith will hold your hand. Every night before bed, Donald sits in his favorite chair by the window, presses play on an old recording, and listens to his wife's favorite hymn. The same one she used to hum while folding laundry or watering the plants. He closes his eyes, lets the notes drift through the quiet, and offers a soft prayer. Not a plea, not a ritual, just a moment of connection, a moment of remembering something bigger than himself. In those still moments, he doesn't feel alone, he feels anchored. As we grow older, the world around us shifts more than we expect. Friends pass, health changes. Roles we once held, provider, parent, partner, fade into memory. What stays, what truly endures, is often invisible. It's the inner compass that helps us stay steady when everything else feels uncertain. For Donald, faith gave him that compass. But for someone else, it might be a quiet belief in kindness, in nature, in the rhythm of seasons, or in the simple dignity of waking each day with intention. It doesn't have to come from religion. It only has to come from somewhere deeper than fear. The difference it makes is real. According to a study from Mayo Clinic, older adults who practice regular meditation or prayer show significant reductions in blood pressure and improvements in sleep quality. That's not just comfort, that's longevity. Donald doesn't go to church every week. He doesn't preach, but he has something sacred, a few quiet minutes each evening where he remembers who he is, who he loved, and what still matters. That quiet habit became his shield during the storms, his light in darker moments. You don't have to believe in the same things he does, but you do need something to believe in, something to steady your breath when the future feels uncertain, something to remind you that no matter how much life changes, there's a place inside you that stays whole. And with that quiet strength holding him steady, Donald was finally ready for the last piece of the puzzle, the skill that turned all his foundations into freedom. His ability to adapt, to bend without breaking, and to welcome the unknown without fear. Life doesn't stop when you grow old, it just changes how it touches you. The first time Donald tried to join a Zoom call with his granddaughter, his hands shook. The screen flipped upside down, the microphone wouldn't unmute, and at one point he accidentally turned on a filter that gave him bunny ears. But when her face finally appeared on the screen and she squealed, "Grandpa," something shifted inside him. It wasn't perfect, but it was connection. And he realized in that moment that the world wasn't leaving him behind. He had just stopped trying to keep up. Too many people his age live like life is frozen in the past. They resist anything unfamiliar. They insist on their old phones, avoid new habits, and close the door on anything they didn't grow up with. But what they're really doing is building walls between themselves and the world. Fear of change slowly turns into fear of life. Donald could feel it happening to him, too, until he decided to learn, not to master something, but to stay open. That decision changed everything. There's a big difference between the man who still carries a flip phone that barely holds a charge and hasn't spoken to his nephew in 8 months, and the 80-year-old woman who live streams her Sunday baking to friends and grandkids from 3 different states. One is holding onto what was, the other is embracing what is. Adaptability is not about technology, it's about willingness. Donald made it a rule to learn one new thing each week. Some were small: how to check the weather on his phone, how to use voice-to-text for messages, how to find walking trails using Google Maps. Others took more effort, navigating online banking, signing up for a virtual book club. He didn't do it all at once. He just stayed curious, and that curiosity made him feel alive. Because the truth is, staying flexible keeps your mind sharp, your heart open, and your spirit young. The more you resist change, the smaller your world becomes. But the more you welcome it, the more life continues to find its way to you, in new voices, new skills, new smiles across a screen. And as Donald opened his world one step at a time, he finally saw the full picture. Not a life waiting to be rescued, but a life rebuilt from the inside out. Which brings us to one final thought, a truth that ties every pillar together and might just stay with you long after this video ends. Donald no longer waits for his children to visit. He lives in a way that makes them want to call every day. He didn't get here overnight. It took quiet mornings filled with reflection, lonely evenings that taught him resilience, and a series of small but powerful choices. Through time, Donald rebuilt his life not by reaching outward but by strengthening what was already within. His financial stability gave him peace. His health gave him energy. His friendships gave him joy. His purpose gave him direction. His emotional strength gave him steadiness. His faith gave him grounding. And his adaptability gave him the courage to step into a changing world with curiosity instead of fear. In the soft light of an early evening, Donald now sits by the window with a pen in hand, writing another letter to his granddaughter. There's a quiet smile on his face, not because everything is perfect, but because today he chose to live. Not react, not wait, but live. That moment, the letter, the light, the calm, is what a strong foundation looks like. No one built it for him. He built it himself. You don't have to be the strongest, the smartest, or the most successful person in the room. You just have to be the one who refuses to stop rebuilding. Because strength after 60 isn't about holding on. It's about letting go of what no longer serves you and choosing to begin again. Every day. In your own way. So if you have a parent, a grandparent, or someone you love who's over 60, share this video with them. Not to give them advice, but to give them hope. Because sometimes the smallest choice made today can create the warmest life tomorrow. And that choice might begin with you.